Molech, also referred to as Molech or Malik, was a widely feared god, worshipped primarily by the Ammonites, but influential in Israelite religion as well, especially during periods of syncretism. His cult is infamous in the Bible due to its association with child sacrifice, where infants and young children were offered as burnt offerings to secure blessings or favor. The ritual likely involved burning the children in a hollow statue or furnace, an act strongly condemned in Mosaic law and repeatedly denounced by the prophets. Despite this, some kings of Israel, under foreign cultural pressures, tolerated or even institutionalized Molech worship, creating a direct violation of Yahweh's commandments. Archaeologically, the valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, where Molech worship occurred, became symbolic in Jewish thought as a metaphor for hell or divine punishment.
Bel and Nebo. Bel, a title meaning Lord, was primarily used for Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon and the central figure in Babylonian religion. Marduk was revered as the creator of the universe, the king of the gods, and a deity embodying cosmic order and Babylonian imperial power. His temple, Esagila, stood as a monument to his dominance and the strength of the Babylonian Empire. Nebo, often called Nabu, was considered the son of Marduk and worshipped as the god of wisdom, writing, and destiny. He held a stylus in depictions symbolizing his role as the divine scribe who inscribed human fate. Nebo's temple in Borsippa was a sacred center for scribal training and religious worship. The Bible mocks both Bel and Nebo, particularly in Isaiah 46, 1-2, where it states, "Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden." This passage illustrates the impotence and eventual downfall of these Babylonian gods in the face of Yahweh's judgment. Jeremiah also prophesies the shame and terror that will come upon Bel and Nebo when Babylon falls to the Persians. Bel and Nebo retain their significance in the Bible as representatives of pagan idol worship, highlighting the futility of placing trust in gods other than Yahweh, who alone holds ultimate sovereignty.
Baal, meaning Lord or Master, was the supreme storm and fertility god of the Canaanites and Phoenicians. His worship was deeply rooted in ensuring the fertility of the land, agricultural success, and human reproduction, vital concerns in the agrarian societies of the ancient Near East. Baal was imagined as a powerful warrior deity, often depicted holding a lightning bolt symbolizing his command over storms, thunder, and rain, which were essential for crops. The mythology of Baal describes him as a heroic figure locked in an eternal struggle with Mot, the god of death and sterility. The annual victory of Baal over Mot ensured the cyclical return of fertility to the earth and the continuation of life. Baal's consorts, including the goddesses Ashtoreth and Anat, were worshipped alongside him, emphasizing fertility and war. The worship of Baal in Israel became widespread, especially under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, whose support of Baal worship brought significant foreign religious influence into the kingdom. Baal worship included various rituals such as animal sacrifices, ecstatic ceremonies, and at times human sacrifices, including children, which Israelite law prohibited and condemned severely. The prophet Elijah confronted Baal's prophets on Mount Carmel in a dramatic showdown designed to prove Yahweh's supremacy. Despite the frantic prayers and rituals of Baal's 450 priests, no response came until Elijah prayed once. Then fire from heaven consumed his water-soaked sacrifice, issuing a definitive judgment on Baal's impotence and affirming Yahweh as the one true God. Baal's worship was also connected to sexual immorality and temple prostitution, ritualistic acts intended to invoke fertility but viewed by Israelite prophets as defilement and spiritual betrayal. His influence faded as monotheism grew, but left a lasting legacy as a chief symbol of idolatry in biblical texts.
Dagon, or Dion, was the chief deity of the Philistines, worshipped predominantly as a god of grain, agriculture, and fertility, a vital figure for the coastal agrarian Philistine culture. While some ancient texts and later popular culture identify Dagon as a fish god, biblical and archaeological evidence primarily associate him with grain and agriculture, though his worship was complex and multifaceted. Temples dedicated to Dagon existed in key Philistine cities such as Ashdod, Gaza, and Beth Dagon, serving as religious and cultural centers. The Bible describes how the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant and placed it in Dagon's temple in Ashdod. Miraculously, the statue of Dagon fell face down before the Ark 2 mornings in a row, the second time with its head and hands broken off, symbolizing Yahweh's power and judgment over this false god. Dagon's worship involved sacrifices, feasts, and festivals to secure agricultural prosperity and military success. One dramatic biblical episode includes the celebration of Samson's captivity at Dagon's temple in Gaza, where Samson prayed for strength and pulled down the temple pillars, killing himself and thousands of Philistines, striking a profound blow to Dagon's cult. Though specific rituals of Dagon's worship remain partially speculative due to scant historical records, it is clear that his cult played a significant role in Philistine society and in the spiritual conflicts documented in the Bible.
Chemosh. Chemosh was the national god of the Moabites, a people closely related and geographically adjacent to the ancient Israelites. Unlike some deities primarily associated with fertility or storms, Chemosh's primary role was as a war god and protector of Moab. He was believed to determine victory or defeat in battle, making him central to Moabite national identity and military hopes. Worship of Chemosh included the construction of temples, sanctuaries, and high places dedicated to him. Moabite kings, including King Mesha, attributed their military successes and failures to Chemosh's favor or wrath. The famous Moabite stone, Mesha Steer, records King Mesha's vow and military campaigns, crediting Chemosh for victories and recounting acts of devotion, including the slaughter of enemy populations in Chemosh's name. The Bible condemns Chemosh's cult as abominable and idolatrous. It recounts how King Solomon, influenced by his foreign wives, built high places for Chemosh alongside other foreign gods. Later, King Josiah of Judah launched a religious reformation, destroying Chemosh's high places and purging his worship from Israelite territory. Human and animal sacrifices formed part of Chemosh's worship, including the notorious account of King Mesha sacrificing his firstborn son on the city wall to gain Chemosh's favor in battle. This act symbolizes the extreme and tragic dimensions of idolatry in the ancient Near East and serves as a stark warning in biblical texts.
The Golden Calf. The story of the Golden Calf is one of the most iconic and cautionary tales of Israelite idolatry, found in Exodus 32. While Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days and nights receiving the 10 Commandments, the people grew restless and feared he had died. They turned to Aaron, Moses' brother, and asked him to craft a tangible god to lead them, reflecting the influence of the Egyptian polytheistic environment from which they had just been delivered. Aaron collected their gold jewelry and melted it down to create a golden calf, declaring it the god who brought them out of Egypt. The calf symbolized strength and fertility, common attributes of bulls and calves in nearby cultures, including Egypt, where bull deities like Apis were revered. The Israelites offered sacrifices and engaged in revelry around the idol, an act of blatant violation of the commandment forbidding the making and worship of idols. When Moses returned and saw the scene, he shattered the stone tablets inscribed with the commandments in anger, burned the golden calf, ground it into powder, scattered it on water, and forced the people to drink it. This act symbolized the severity of their sin and its consequences. The golden calf incident reveals the Israelites' wavering faith and susceptibility to idolatry, despite witnessing undeniable miracles. It set a precedent for future struggles with false gods and the need for persistent prophetic leadership and covenant renewal. The Levites, who remained loyal to Yahweh, carried out a purge of the idolatries, emphasizing the stark division between faithfulness and idolatry.
Nisroch. Nisroch is mentioned in the Bible as an Assyrian god, specifically in the context of King Sennacherib worshiping in his temple when he was assassinated by his own sons, 2 Kings 19:37, Isaiah 37:38. Although little external archaeological evidence directly identifies a deity named Nisroch, some scholars suggest it may be a scribal error or corruption of another Assyrian god's name, potentially Ninurta or Nusku, associated with aspects of war, agriculture, or fire. The biblical narrative highlights Nisroch's temple as not only a place of worship, but also a locus of political intrigue, showcasing the tense intersection of religion and power in the ancient Near East. Nisroch's impotence compared to Yahweh's is implicit in Sennacherib's downfall in his temple, underscoring the Bible's theme that idols offer no true protection.
Rimmon, often identified with Hadad, was the prominent Syrian god of storms, rain, and fertility. His worship was deeply embedded in the culture and governance of Syria, so much so that even those devoted to Yahweh faced tension in official duties requiring they bow in Rimmon's temple. Hadad, as a storm god, held sway over rain and agricultural fertility, critical to life and prosperity in the ancient Near East. Biblical accounts recount the healing of Naam, the Syrian commander afflicted with leprosy, who, upon his recovery, pledged allegiance to Yahweh, yet expressed the dilemma of continuing protocol in Rimmon's temple, 2 Kings 5. This narrative exemplifies the complex cultural entanglements Israelite and neighboring peoples had with false gods, reflecting how idolatry was deeply woven into the social fabric of both Israel and its neighbors.
The Divine Council and Nephilim. The Bible contains intriguing references to a divine council, an assembly of spiritual beings often called the sons of God or Elohim. This council functions as a heavenly court where Yahweh reigns as supreme judge. Psalm 82 portrays God standing among these gods, judging their injustice and decreeing that they shall die like mere mortals, emphasizing their limited authority and eventual downfall. These beings are understood to be lesser divine powers under Yahweh's command, unlike the polytheistic myths where gods compete for supremacy. The Nephilim are among the most mysterious biblical figures, described as the offspring of these divine beings and human women. Often interpreted as giants or mighty warriors, the Nephilim symbolize the blurring of divine and human boundaries and the increasing corruption of the earth before the flood. Their existence highlights the spiritual downfall requiring divine judgment and cleansing.
Other regional gods. The Bible lists numerous other false gods worshipped by nations around Israel, especially after the Assyrian resettlements. These include deities such as Sakut, Benoth, Nergal, Ashima, Nebahaz, Tartak, Adrammelech, and Anammelech. Many of these gods demanded child sacrifices or other abominable rites that further corrupted Israelite worship. Their presence in Israelite culture illustrates how idolatry was entrenched not only through Israel's own disobedience, but also through imposed pagan traditions by conquering nations.
Asherah was an ancient West Semitic mother goddess, consort of the high god El, remembered in Ugaritic texts as mother of the gods and venerated across Syria-Palestine with strong associations to fertility, motherhood, and sacred tree imagery. Inscriptions from Kuntiet Adrud and Khirbet el-Kom mention Yahweh and his Asherah, indicating that some Israelites or Judahites linked her to Yahweh in popular practice, though scholars debate whether the phrase denotes the goddess herself or a cultic object or sanctuary. In the Hebrew Bible, Asherah can denote either the goddess or a wooden cult symbol, often set up at high places and under every green tree. And reforming kings are depicted as cutting down these Asherim as part of covenantal purification. Claims about widespread temple prostitution in her cult are treated cautiously by modern scholarship, which acknowledges fertility-oriented practices while disputing firm evidence for institutionalized sacred prostitution. Ugaritic traditions chiefly present Asherah as El's consort and progenitress of the gods, and later translations that rendered Asherah as groves helped obscure the personal deity behind the tree or pole imagery.
Astarte was a major West Semitic goddess, Hellenized from Astarte, whose cult spread through Phoenician centers such as Tyre and Sidon, and was associated with sexual love and war rather than straightforward agricultural fertility. Ashtoreth in the Hebrew Bible is a polemical reshaping of her name by blending it with a Hebrew word for shame, signaling prophetic opposition to her worship and to royal-led syncretism that introduced her cult into Israelite practice. Astarte's identity overlaps with Mesopotamian Ishtar and, in cross-cultural settings, with Egyptian Isis and Hathor, and later Greek and Roman goddesses such as Aphrodite and Juno, exemplifying syncretism where deities and rites blend across cultures. Popular descriptions of sacred prostitution are frequently repeated, but modern assessments urge caution, noting the lack of decisive evidence for institutional temple prostitution even where fertility-tinged rites are recognized.
Queen of Heaven. The Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah denotes a goddess venerated in Judah with household rites including baking cakes and pouring libations, a domestic worship pattern explicitly described and condemned by the prophet. Jeremiah 7:18 depicts children gathering wood, fathers lighting fires, and women kneading dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven, showing coordinated family participation in these rites. Jeremiah 44 records continued vows to burn incense and pour drink offerings to the Queen of Heaven, with some claiming their well-being depended on these practices, a stance Jeremiah rejects as covenantal infidelity. The title is commonly identified with Mesopotamian Ishtar and closely related to West Semitic Astarte, reflecting regional syncretism that brought neighboring goddess cults into tension with exclusive Yahweh worship.
Anat, or Anath, was a principal West Semitic goddess of war and love, renowned for youthful vigor and ferocity, and closely associated with the storm god Baal in Canaanite tradition. In the Ugaritic Baal cycle, Anat mourns Baal, collaborates with Chemosh, the sun goddess, and confronts the death god Mot in a cycle emphasizing violent victory and restoration of order. Anat's cult crossed into Egypt, where New Kingdom rulers, including Ramesses II, favored her as a martial protectress, and later syncretism blended Anat with Astarte into the composite goddess Atargatis. Iconography presents her as a formidable guardian and avenger,
balancing protective roles toward Baal's kingship with an unflinching capacity for destruction against cosmic enemies.
Elat. Elat, Elath, functions as an epithet meaning the goddess, commonly applied to Asherah or Athirot, signaling her status as El's consort and mother of deities within West Semitic pantheons. Because biblical Asherah can mean the goddess or a wooden cult symbol, later readers often encounter Elat indirectly through references to Asherah poles tied to high places and groves. High places were local installations with altars, standing stones, and sacred objects set on elevated or wooded sites, and biblical narratives portrayed reforms that dismantled this infrastructure to enforce exclusive covenant worship. Older translations that rendered Asherah as groves further obscured the personal deity behind vegetation symbolism, masking the Elat-Asherah connection in subsequent readings.
Tanit was the chief goddess of Carthage, and likely the consort of Baal-Hamon, rapidly attaining precedence in Punic religion, so that her name often appears before his on monuments from the 5th century BCE onward. Her cult combined celestial and maternal aspects and spread across Punic territories, with dedications attested from North Africa to Malta, Sardinia, and Iberia. The Carthage Tophet was an open-air precinct with urns and stelae associated with infant burials and vows, which many scholars interpret as evidence of child sacrifice within the Tanit Baal-Hamon cult, though debate persists over whether it was primarily a cemetery. Recent osteological studies and convergence with classical sources are cited by some as supporting sacrificial practices, while others remain skeptical of drawing categorical conclusions from the material record. Beyond Carthage, Punic shrines tied to Tanit appear across the western Mediterranean, including the Escularum cave on Ibiza, indicating the westward diffusion of Phoenician religious traditions.
Isis, daughter of Geb and Nut, sister wife of Osiris and mother of Horus, was among Egypt's most important goddesses, renowned for magical power, healing, and protective motherhood tied to kingship and afterlife ideology. In the Osiris myth, Seth murders Osiris. Isis recovers and reassembles his body through magic and conceives Horus posthumously, who later contends with Seth to restore cosmic and social order, or Ma'at. From the Hellenistic period onward, Isis's cult expanded widely beyond Egypt, with sanctuaries throughout the Mediterranean and into the Roman world, where initiatory mysteries promised divine favor and salvation-like benefits. Iconographically, Isis appears with the throne hieroglyph as a crown or with cow horns embracing a solar disk, and her identity often overlaps with Hathor and the Eye of Re as a many-named universal protectress. Hathor. Hathor was a sky and mother goddess, presiding over love, fertility, music, dance, and joy, typically depicted as a cow or as a woman with cow horns encircling a solar disk, signaling royal and cosmic power. Her principal cult center was the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, elaborated in Ptolemaic and Roman periods, where reliefs and chapels attest to roles in kingship, healing, and festivals. As Eye of Re, Hathor carries a potent solar aspect that could manifest as the lioness Sekhmeth, whose pacification through red-dyed beer is preserved in the tradition of the heavenly cow.
Hathor was patroness of foreign lands and frontier expeditions, venerated as Lady of Turquoise at Sinai mining sites, and later identified by Greeks with Aphrodite in a pattern of cross-cultural syncretism. Her emphasis on sexuality and fertility parallels broader Near Eastern themes that biblical writers critiqued in neighboring religions, even as Egyptian theology integrated these powers within cosmic order and royal ideology.
Artemis was a localized form of the goddess whose great temple, first endowed by Croesus and rebuilt after Herostratus's arson, ranked among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Her Ephesian cult statue was an un-Greek, mummy-like figure with a high headdress and a torso festooned with many breasts, emphasizing fecundity and civic prosperity, distinct from the Greek huntress type. Acts 19 recounts a riot provoked by artisans whose idol trade was threatened by Christian preaching, crystallized in the shout, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," in the city theater. Ephesian civic identity, pilgrimage economy, and craft production were bound to Artemis's cult, and the city clerk's reference to an image that fell from heaven reflects claims of divinely descended or meteoritic objects legitimating temple authority. The temple's prestige and successive rebuildings illustrate how sacred infrastructure, spectacle, and commerce reinforced one another in a major Mediterranean urban center.
Aphrodite was the Greek goddess of sexual love and beauty, honored also for fertility, and in some locales such as Sparta and Thebes for martial associations, with principal cult centers at Cyprus, Cythera, and Corinth. Her cult shows clear Near Eastern influence, with strong links to Phoenician Astarte and Mesopotamian Ishtar Inanna, while Greek tradition preserved dual origin stories, foam-born in Hesiod versus daughter of Zeus and Dione in Homer. Cyprus anchored her identity, hence titles like Cyprus and Paphia, and Paphos remained a major pilgrimage site, while Corinth's prominence has prompted modern reassessment of claims about institutional sacred prostitution. Recent scholarship widely rejects the idea of organized temple prostitution in Greek Aphrodite cults, noting ambiguous literary passages and lack of archaeological substantiation, and urging caution in projecting Near Eastern models onto Greek practice. Over time, Aphrodite absorbed and reinterpreted Levantine themes of sexuality and fertility within Greek civic religion, and later merged with Roman Venus in an imperial context.
Want to understand the Bible more deeply? Keep growing in God's Word. Watch this next video.